Hi. Um, I'd been kind of... Let me fix this. That seems better. Yeah, look, I'd been kind of going on and off, planning a scripted video, kind of updating the Virtua Fighter situation, but, stuff keeps happening, and so my hand has been forced, and I now have to, do this instead, so that I can actually talk about it in a relatively timely manner. So we get the unscripted version. Sorry about that. I'm literally on my fucking 10-minute break at work. So let's just quickly talk about what's happening. So this is all coming from Midori, who is apparently a fairly reputable like leaker focused on like Sega and Atlas stuff. And they've been talking on and off about Sega's plans ever since the Game Awards at the end of last year, where they announced, you know, the new era, new energy thing, where they announced, like, they showed off footage for, like, you know, apparently, like, what looks to be like a Lizard Cube, Shinobi remake, or reboot, I suppose. That the distinction between remake and reboot is actually kind of important for reasons we'll get into. They showed off the new Crazy Taxi, more Golden Axe, more Streets of Rage. No Virtua Fighter. Congrats to all the Jet Set Radio fans out there. No, I'm not one of your number, but congratulations all the same. Yeah, no Virtua Fighter, but Virtua Fighter has now been talked about. It's been mentioned a couple times by this person here. And for what it's worth, Midori, everything that they've said seemed like, when they were talking about, they've talked a lot about like Crazy Taxi, and what they've talked about seems to be pretty in line with what Sega themselves have actually said about their plans for the future of Crazy Taxi and all their other things. Because basically, like, the thing that they're doing is they're trying to revive a bunch of their legacy franchises and intellectual property, and they're doing so in one of two ways, which Midori talks about in a previous thread. The two ways are what Midori refers to as remakes and reboots. So remakes are like your $70, you know, full price games with like DLC roadmaps and stuff like that. And reboots apparently are meant to be more like free-to-play live service type deals. There's actually an article, I forget where, I might link it in the description, but there's an article somewhere where a representative from Sega talks about like their super game initiative or something like that. And when they're talking about what they want to do with Virtua Fighter, and there's a thread where Midori talks about this as well, they talk about how their plan for the Crazy Taxi reboot, as opposed to a remake, is to make it a live service thing, and they're very directly taking inspiration from things like Fortnite and Grand Theft Auto Online. So previously, Midori has mentioned Virtua Fighter once before, and that was in the context of Virtua Fighter being a reboot. And then they further clarified in another thread that remake means the $70 DLC, yada yada, and the reboot is the free-to-play live service thing. And so now Midori has posted like a whole thread going over what the whole deal with Virtua Fighter even is. So let's take a look at the details and see kind of what's going on. So, Virtua Fighter. It is online and esports focused and has online and offline modes, including customization modes. So the esports focused thing is completely par for the course. Like, this is what Sega has envisioned for Virtua Fighter for a very long time. Sega was actually a fairly prominent sponsor of a lot of like official VF tournaments in Japan. So like Sega's been very actively involved with the the Japanese competitive VF scene for like since at least the VF4 days, if not earlier. And of course they've been supporting VF5 Ultimate Showdown stuff ever since that came out. So it being like an online and esports focused thing makes 100% sense. There are new characters with a modern art style and character artists, so they're updating a lot of like character designs and introducing new characters and stuff like that. It is a game concept that changed many times since 2021 up to now, so they've been workshopping this, clearly. Which also kind of, like, you know, VF5 US by that notion is definitely like a stopgap kind of thing. Streaming and spectating implementation is an important part of this title and super game concept. So again, the super game concept is like their whole live service model that they're trying to bring into for their free-to-play games. Virtua Fighter is clearly going to be one of those. And so, obviously, they're like, well, we want people to be running online tournaments and stuff like that and hosting lobbies and things like that. A lot of that infrastructure is already there in VF5 Ultimate Showdown, and it works really well, aside from the netcode. Which is important, because there's a couple other points. So it is a reboot of the Virtua Fighter series in development by current Virtua Fighter staff. So this is like Seiji Aoki and all the other people who worked on, like, you know, VF5, like Ultimate Showdown and Final Showdown even. So these are people who, like, they understand what VF is, and they know what they want to do with it. And it is a title releasing on all major platforms with crossplay and rollback. This is the big one. Obviously, Seiji Aoki in the past has said that rollback is non-negotiable. We gotta do rollback. The fact that rollback was not an Ultimate Showdown was like a compromise, because Sega of Japan said, no, we need to get this game out for the 60th anniversary of Sega. But Seiji Aoki has said rollback for the next VF game is non-negotiable. And not only is this game supposedly getting rollback, it is also getting crossplay on all major platforms. So I'm going to assume that means definitely, you know, PS4, PS5, PC, Xbox, maybe even Nintendo Switch, or potentially the Switch 2, depending on what the timeline looks like. But that is going to be massive, because one of the things that a friend of mine, Pitchy, has talked about is how Virtua Fighter should be the game that anyone can play on anything. So, you know, as opposed to, like, say, Tekken 8, which you need, like, a fairly well-spec'd out gaming rig for, or you need to have a PS5, which is a console that doesn't exist and has no games on it. So, VF being accessible to anybody with, like, a console of some description or, like, a decent PC is really encouraging. Now, this is the one that has got people worrying a bit. This is a Virtua Fighter title that is developed to be a modern competitor to Street Fighter and Tekken, with esports concepts and mechanics that are similar to current Street Fighter and other fighting games. It is a concept that evolved a lot. People have already gone on record saying stuff like, oh, they're gonna add Drive Rush and Rage Arts and Supers and whatever to Virtua Fighter, bros. It sucks, it's gonna be terrible. And it's like, that's goober behavior, my friends. That is goober behavior. You can't be doing that. This statement, it means nothing. It's meaningless. What the fuck is an esports mechanic? What does that mean? Like, tell me in the comments what you think an esports mechanic is. I would be delighted to know. But what I think this is actually saying here is, of course, they are going to visit some sort of ideas about, like, well, okay, what are the cool visual things that Street Fighter and Tekken are doing that are visually arresting and also crushing stream bit rates? So, like, I think some, like, if they are actually, because, like, a lot of these mechanics that people are talking about, where it's like, you know, you rush forward and you're like plus 1,000,000 and whatever, or you're like, a lot of these attacks that, a lot of these, like, mechanics that people are worried about that are present in other fighting games literally would not make sense in the context of Virtua Fighter. It's like, okay, they put Drive Rush in Virtua Fighter. What the hell is that going to do? Like, Virtua Fighter is already a game where you spend, like, 90% of the match in your opponent's face. Like, you know, I mean, I could very well see there being some kind of, like, armored attack. Like, I don't think that's entirely out of the question. But I honestly don't even think that would be that bad. Because, like, that kind of dynamic already exists in another fighting game. You have the triangle system, and you already have another game with that triangle system that has an armored move, and it is called Pokken Tournament. And Charge Attack, which was basically like a Street Fighter 4 focus attack in that game, presented basically zero issues for the gameplay. It actually was like a really useful way to get people into like you know, people who don't otherwise play fighting games, thinking about like strategizing things like, oh, if my opponent's going to try to use their charge attack to blow through whatever move I'm using in the duel phase, then I can throw them. And, you know, you can kind of introduce a bit of those mind games to people. So I think that's going to be like a really big deal. And I think that could be very useful. Another thing is it could just be some kind of like screen pausing cutscene attack or whatever. And it's like, everyone's like, oh, they disrupt the flow and everything. And it's like, they do. I won't pretend that they don't. But also, if it's some kind of screen, like game pausing cutscene thing in Virtua Fighter, I'm going to be real with you. I kind of wouldn't mind that. Because, have you guys played Virtua Fighter? Do you know how much thinking you have to do, like, all the time when you are playing that game? That game it's awesome, but it is exhausting to play. You are never not making decisions, like, actively making decisions about every single interaction. Like, good lord, try stand blocking against Akira. Like, so we may very well see something like an armored attack or a cutscene or whatever. Like, I don't think any of these things are going to significantly damage how Virtua Fighter is going to play, especially because, again, current Virtua Fighter staff, these guys know what Virtua Fighter is about. They did not compromise on Virtua Fighter when they released Ultimate Showdown. They could have, but they didn't. And I think that you know, that's probably going to stay the same. It's, if anything, they might very well revisit, like, the short-lived trend of, like, you know, Soul Calibur 6 and MK11, where, like, the new game is just gonna have lethal hits. That would fit in fantastically with Virtua Fighter, and I mean, it wouldn't really change much anyway. Like, you know, you can draw attention to the big moments that you want people to focus on. They look cool for streams, and, like, oh, a mechanic where you land a move under certain conditions and people explode, like, that happens in Virtua Fighter already. It's called counter-hitting someone's throw with an Abare launcher. Like, that just happens, dude. So, I don't think this is anything to worry about just yet, anyway. I could be wrong, but I don't think this whole esports concepts and mechanics thing is anything to worry about. And there is all new main story and side stories with brand new characters. That's a big deal. Like, the whole, maybe that, I don't know if they're ditching the J6 thing or if they're just, like, retraining it, but, like, Virtua Fighter having an actual story is going to be pretty good for casual players, I think. Especially because they don't have to necessarily give up, like, the quest mode or anything like that. Because I really like the quest mode as a story mode in terms of, like, you know, making the player the subject of their own story. But, like, having an actual story that people can, like, you know, giving the characters, like, actual, like, personalities and a world to latch onto does actually do a lot to get people invested, so that'll be really good. The final thing, there is an evolution of ranked matches that is similar to modern fighting games. This is a title that is focusing on scaling with the player and their playstyles when they play online. So obviously, like, the online play is going to be a really big focus, and, like, that's, you know, it makes complete sense to do that. Like, absolutely, you know, like, no notes, right? It's the thing. Online play is a really big deal, and of course they want to scale that up and have it be responsive to the players themselves when they are releasing it on all major platforms with crossplay and rollback. Like, you want your ranked online matches to be, like, phenomenal. My working theory for a long time was that Virtua Fighter was basically Sega's Half-Life, in the sense that you know, they wouldn't release a Virtua Fighter game until they had some kind of technological development to go with it. Like, VF1, 2, 3 was all, like, the visual, you know, like the 3D technology and stuff. VF4, you had, like, the, you know, VFnet, the customization systems and everything, and the stat tracking that would eventually end up being used in Tekken, funnily enough. VF5 had VFTV, like, you know, the spectating thing. There was in arcades and in the game proper. And I was thinking for a while that maybe online play is where this, like, you know, technological innovation is going to come from Sega with regards to, like, the, you know, a new Virtua Fighter. And doesn't necessarily have to be, like, you know, super rollback GGPO2 or whatever, because that's probably going to end up in Project L anyway with the server-side rollback, but, like, it'd be really cool to see if Sega comes up with some kind of similar solution. Or at the very least, if they actively make Virtua Fighter, like, more of a, like, they give it more of, like, a stronger online play presence and system. So, look, in conclusion, I think actually all of this news is very exciting, especially if this Virtua Fighter is going to be like a free-to-play game. Like, games like Killer Instinct and Grand Blue Fantasy versus Rising have proven that the free-to-play model can work really well for fighting games as long as you do it right, and it's not difficult to do it right. I'm sure we will even see that come to bear with Project L. Sorry, I'm not calling it 2XKO. But, like, the free-to-play model can work incredibly well for fighting games, I think. And I think Sega could probably execute it fairly well. I'm not willing to put all my eggs in the basket of believing that this game is going to be absolutely flawless, but I think this news is more exciting than not. So let's all just keep an eye out and see what happens, and hopefully the glorious return of Virtua Fighter will be worth the wait. Alright, I'm gonna jump off for now, but peace.